Hey guys, welcome back to another one of my Cloak and Dagger videos, and today we're going to be talking the 8th episode of the 2nd season, otherwise titled 2-Player. Now, watching the trailer of this episode last week, I was like, this is probably the most filler episode ever. However though, watching the episode itself, it didn't feel that way at all. It was really a good episode, a solid episode, had a lot of references to the comics, had a lot of references to voodoo religion, like real life voodoo religion, so I'm gonna be talking about all of that over the course of this video, be it references to the comic books or otherwise, and trying to fill in all the spaces, what's gonna happen next. What are we thinking exactly we're gonna be getting over the course of the upcoming 2 episodes? So without further ado, let's get started with the events of this episode. Now this episode starts right where its predecessor left off, last week's episode that is, and that's basically all about Tyrone getting his intangibility ability, and right now it's about his ability, or lack thereof, to control this new ability of his. Now most of us know, if not all of us, that Tyrone has got a stutter in the comics, but this state of intangibility, the shadow form, is basically that state in which he doesn't stutter anymore. So he reverts back to human form, he stutters, he goes to cloak form or shadow form, and he stops stuttering. So in a way, even though they did change Tyrone from the beginning of the series, such a way that he never had the stutter that he did have on the pages of the comics, it's always been, and once again, in a way, some kind of a reference to his intangibility in the comics and the shadow form / cloak form that he does get out of it, the one in which he doesn't have the stutter. But anyway though, we've got Evita in action, and that's not just a thing of this episode that's going to be ongoing till the end of the season. She's going to be helping a lot for the rest of the season, but nonetheless we've got a lot more Evita in action. And she kind of comes with a lot of information, the kind of information that, Aunt Chantal would have hidden from other people, like Papa Legba, oh he's a Loa, he's the guardian of the crossroads, Voodoo god, and Chantal's husband. Now, Tandy and Brigid have got reason at that point to be kind of surprised, like, wait, what, why, how come? And you've got Evita kind of explaining it to them by stating that Chantal's a Mambo, and that means she's supposed to be married to a Loa. Let's not forget as well that while she's, stating all of that, kind of relaying all of that, she's basically trying to invoke Papa Legba. But alright though, let's explain this from 2 perspectives. We've got the Voodoo, Haitian religion, and we've got the comic book Easter eggs and references in all of these statements. Now I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but we do get Baron Samedi on this episode, and Baron Samedi is highly or heavily tied with the character of Brother Voodoo on the pages of the comics. So when you've got Bon Samedi on one hand, and on the other hand you've got, Evita invoking Papa Legba in this manner, you start thinking of Brother Voodoo invoking Papa Legba on the pages of the comics. But you've also got Evita referring to, her aunt as a Mambo, and a Mambo in Haitian voodoo religion as a female priestess. But at the same time, with everything that's been going on, with Evita over here kind of calling upon or invoking Papa Legba, and with the fact that Damballa has been heavily referenced as of recently, you can't but think of Mambo Lila out of the comics. Now Mambo Lila is the voodoo priestess who on issue number 1 of Days of Zombies, on the pages of the comics, called upon Damballa. So if you remember, and I assume you do, I did mention World of Warcraft a couple of times in conjunction with all the Loa talk on the season. I also mentioned that my favorite Loa on the game, my favorite well-portrayed Loa, was none other than Bon Samedi, the Loa of the dead. Now Baron Samedi on the series is modeled after Baron Samedi on the pages of the comics, and Baron Samedi on the pages of the comics and Bon Samedi on the game I was just speaking about are both modeled after the Haitian voodoo Loa known as Baron Samedi, or actually Bon Samedi. Now the Baron Samedi that we know on the pages of the comics happens to be a member or an agent of the organization that we know as AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics. Of course, when you think of Advanced Idea Mechanics, you're thinking Advanced Idea Mechanics on the pages of the comics and Advanced Idea Mechanics on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But back to Baron Samedi on the pages of the comics though, he is an agent of AIM, he is brother to none other than Damballa, which is the kind of thing that fortifies the reference I was talking about earlier, when it comes to Mambo Lila. And he's heavily tied to Brother Voodoo in the comics, being his foe. And Brother Voodoo in the comics is the man who would later on become Dr. Voodoo, and would after that become the Sorcerer Supreme. So yeah, that's the kind of character that ties in with, Doctor Strange and whatnot. We're gonna get to that if we ever need it on another episode later on. Now we've got a journey into the Darkforce dimension that Brigid and Tandy have decided to embark on in order to save Tyrone. But while the objective to go in to start with was all about finding Tyrone, saving Tyrone, bringing back Tyrone, they kind of split at the very beginning because Brigid does have her unresolved issues as well. You know, she's got to deal with this Mayhem situation. So yeah, she sees Fuchs instead, she looks through, finds her way, she ends up going to the record store, she ends up being found by Mayhem. But I'm going to circle to that in a moment though. Let's stick with Tyrone and Tandy for a little bit and the game that they start playing over there, you know, Duel to Despair. Now, Duel to Despair has presented us with a very different origin story, you know, from the one that we got on the series, but a very similar one, almost identical one, to the one that we got on the pages of the comics. You've been injected with radioactive heroin, find and fight the man who did it. But that's all about their origin story on the pages of the comics. As I just mentioned, that's all about them being injected by drugs that gives them their powers, and that's all about the fact that they use their powers for the very following period, a very long time, to kind of seek vengeance on all the drug dealers out there, all the drug pushers, and of course the people who caused them to have these powers in the first place, the people who injected them with the drugs in the first place. But that is not the only Easter egg that we're presented with when it comes to the comics or to the series, but this game, you know, Duel to Despair. There's also the reference to all the drugging of all these girls, including Tandy, over the past few episodes, which we did see a lot done on behalf of Despair. We do remember as well what I did mention on previous videos, like over the past couple of weeks, which is basically all about D-Light. Now D-Light, and as I mentioned over the course of previous videos, previous weeks, is all about the drug of choice and the creation of choice for Despair. You know, the one that he uses on his victims on the pages of the comics. But moving on though, with the realization that her aunt is dead, Evita is supposed to take over from her. That's what the spirit of her aunt, or what seems to be the spirit of her aunt, tells her over there. And Evita is like, no, I want to finish high school, I want to study to become a doctor, and then in the end, of course, become a doctor. Now, we are watching an episode that is heavily involved with Baron Samedi, and I did mention before how Baron Samedi is the enemy on the pages of the comics of none other than Brother Voodoo. But here, though, is the part that I didn't mention. Jericho Drum is the man who was born to later on become Brother Voodoo, who would later on as well become Dr. Voodoo, and there is this little detail that we've got over here that is basically a common factor between Jericho Drum on one hand and Evita on this episode. Jericho Drum on the pages of the comics would leave Haiti, travel to America, study to become a doctor, and then become a doctor, which is basically Leslie traveling to America part because she's already there, the very same kind of aspiration that she does show on this episode. Now that's not all there is to it though, because just like Chantel on the series, you know, Evita's aunt was basically a Voodoo priestess. On the pages of the comics, Daniel, Jericho's brother, was a Hungan Supreme, which basically makes him a Voodoo priest. Now, there's also the fact that Evita's aunt over here, or her spirit, that is, started talking to her about, you know, becoming the next Mambo, the next Voodoo priestess. And in a similar manner, an injured and on his deathbed Daniel, on the pages of the comics, asked Jericho to promise to take up the mantle, to, you know, take up the ways of his ancestors, and pretty much use that kind of knowledge, that kind of power, to avenge him. The avenging him part did even have an equivalent on this episode. You know, you want to save your man, you gotta become the next me. But circling back to Tyrone and Tandy, within the game they see Despair. We got two versions that we're watching within the game. We've got the live version and we've got the actual game version. And the actual game version kind of looks more like Despair out of the comics, the way he dresses, than the, you know, live action version. Now once again, it's not exactly him because, hey, the version from the comics is a demon. But nonetheless, it seems like the game version, or the game in general, on this episode has been made in such a way that it is used to present us with a lot of Easter eggs and references to the comic book origin of these two, you know, Tyrone and Tandy, and also present us with a lot of Easter eggs when it comes to other things, like Despair, the original Despair, out of the comics. But while we're on the subject of going back to comic book origins, we've got the original comic book Mayhem happening on this episode, because Mayhem and Bridget are no more split persons, they're more like split personalities. We've got Bridget finally giving in, you know, just asking Mayhem to listen every once in a while, not always do things the violent extremist way, but rather listen to her every once in a while. We've got the two of them back in one body, but instead of the anger being bottled inside, it's the one on the surface. So Mayhem is the one driving, and Bridget, you know, the kind of one, the one that goes by the rules, the one that goes by the book, is the one that's bottled up inside, even though the voice of Brigid is still gonna be heard, because at the very least, right now we know that Mayhem has promised to listen. Now, that's exactly what I was talking about on last week's video, you know, Mayhem from the comics, one who definitely did not end up becoming an Avenger, but was definitely considered for the Avengers Initiative. Now, one of the complaints over the past few episodes is that they were very Tandy-centric, which was suiting of the kind of story that they were trying to tell, but we cannot complain about that and then complain about them not having a purpose, not knowing what they need to do or what their powers are all about. So those couple of episodes, or to be more precise, episode 6 was all about Tandy figuring out who Tandy is and what Tandy wants and what her rock is, which is basically Tyrone. Now this week's episode has done the same for Tyrone. It's kind of picking up on the idea that Tyrone's got a problem, and his major problem over here is the guy is tired of losing. He's tired of barely tying up at times, but mostly losing. But this time around, in the lower dimension, he's got this game, it's doable, it's redoable as well in case he loses at one point, and he could basically do it all over until he wins. It's all about losing Billy, it's all about almost losing Tandy, it's all about Despair's attempts on last week's episode to take away his hope that Tandy is actually the best friend that he thinks she is. But okay, getting closer to the end of the episode, the ascension of Evita into becoming a Voodoo priestess, that was equivalent to Jericho Drum becoming a Voodoo priest. The entire ritual as well that we see over here, you know, for her ascension into becoming a Mambo, that's pretty much how rituals go when it comes to Haiti and lower worship, and that's pretty much how we see the equivalent rituals on the pages of the comics. Now, the only sad thing over here is that in order to become a Mambo, this has been established at the beginning of the episode, you've got to marry a Loa, and in this case, Evita has managed to sacrifice her future, her dreams, everything, in order to make sure that Tyrone is saved. She's now married to Bonsandi. But finally though, and before I get to end this video, here are some stray comments when it comes to this episode. Number 1, Adina Johnson has gone for vengeance for her older son and made sure she's got all the information as well for her younger son. So yeah, she's killed Connors is gone, but nonetheless she's got all the information needed to find the body of Billy and to save Tyrone. Number 2, by the end of the episode, it does seem that Andre Deshawn has figured out the way to unlock the lock, to become a Loa. Number 3, we've got no clue what's happened to Leah, but it does seem like she's dead, it does seem like she's gotten drained. In a way, it does seem similar to what Andre did with Chantel on last week's episode, so yeah, chances are Leah is dead and gone. Number 4, Tyrone and Evita are no longer a thing, and that's basically all because of and thanks to Bonsandi. But nonetheless, we also know right now that we might end up seeing some Tyrone and Tandy in the future, which I know a lot of people, by the way, have been wanting on the series, even though not really much of a thing in the comics. But finally though, number 5, the zombie poster on one of the poles within the record store. Now that's pretty much a solid Easter egg since we've got Bonsandi all over this episode, and we've got Brother Voodoo as well, hints to Brother Voodoo or Easter eggs to Brother Voodoo. Now this was all about Baron Samedi on the pages of the comics gathering the local people in Haiti and transforming them into zombies or zombie-like beings. Now beyond that point, he used the zombies in order to raid the factories in Haiti, and that's when Brother Voodoo got alerted, you know, of his raids, and that's basically something that led to a showdown between the two of them. So yeah, a lot of references to Brother Voodoo, aka Jericho Drum, a lot of references to Baron Samedi out of the comics, even though the one on the series is not really a full-on portrayal of the Baron Samedi out of the pages of the comics. But that being said though, my work here is done. This was an amazing episode. I think it was one of my favorites, if for anything, for the amount of Easter eggs and references that it did contain. I actually believe it is my favorite episode of the series so far. But that being said as well, let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode, if there is any other Easter egg that I might have missed, and let me know if you did like this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, subscribing to this channel, and while you're at it, make sure you enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a video, publish a community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, Cloak and Dagger or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning into this review and Easter egg video, and have a great day.